Hey everyone, and welcome back to the Deep Dive. So many of you have been asking for this one, an in-depth look at Sun Tzu's The Art of War. And honestly, who isn't fascinated by this book, right? I mean, it's centuries old, but still studied today by everyone from military leaders to CEOs.
And it's amazing how relevant it remains. Like you said, it's been used throughout history. Napoleon was said to have studied it pretty seriously.
It's not just about winning battles on the battlefield, though, right? I mean, you read this book, and you can see it's really about strategy in a much broader sense. It gets into psychology, leadership, even deception.
That's one of the most interesting aspects, I think. You know how Sun Tzu emphasizes understanding human nature, your own and your opponent's?
Yeah, and he uses that example of training the King of Wu's concubines into a disciplined unit to show you these principles apply anywhere you need to lead or influence people. But, I've always wondered about the author himself. Was Sun Tzu even a real person?
Well, that's still up for debate. We don't have definitive proof of his existence. But the text itself seems to reflect a deep understanding of the kind of warfare practiced during the Sun Tzu period in ancient China.
Sun Tzu period. For those of us not up on our ancient Chinese history, what was that all about?
Okay, so imagine China back then. You've got all these different states constantly vying for power, alliances shifting, rivalries boiling over. It was a time of intense conflict. That was the Sun Tzu period, lasted roughly from the 8th to the 5th century BC.
So basically a real-life Game of Thrones where strategic thinking was absolutely vital.
Exactly, and that's where the art of war comes in. It provided a framework for navigating all that chaos, not just for winning battles, but for winning in any kind of conflict, really.
And at the core of it all are the 5 constant factors. Sun Tzu lays them out like this: the moral law, heaven, earth, the commander, and method and discipline.
These are like the fundamental elements of strategy, the forces a leader has to understand to be successful. You might say they're the ingredients in the recipe for victory.
Okay, let's break those down a bit. Starting with moral law. That one sounds kind of abstract to me. What's morality got to do with winning a war?
Well, think of it as the unifying cause. It's what binds a leader and their people together. It's about having a shared purpose, a sense of righteousness that fuels everyone. It's what gives you the will to fight.
So it's like having a strong why, something that motivates the entire nation, not just the army.
You got it. Without that shared belief, an army is just a bunch of people with weapons. They might have brute force, but they lack the resilience and strategic depth of a truly motivated force.
Okay, makes sense. Now what about heaven and earth? Those sound even more out there.
Well, they represent the environmental factors. Heaven covers things like the weather, the seasons, even the time of day. Earth, on the other hand, refers to the physical terrain. Think distances, dangers, strategic locations.
So it's about recognizing how the environment impacts your strategy, like knowing when to attack, when to defend, how to use the terrain to your advantage.
Exactly. A good commander uses the environment as a weapon.
All right, then there's the commander. I'm guessing this goes beyond just being a strong and fearless leader.
Oh, for sure. Sun Tzu lays out a very specific picture of an ideal commander. Someone who's wise, sincere, benevolent, but also courageous and strict. It's a balance of intellect, character, and the ability to inspire.
So not just giving orders, but earning respect, leading by example.
Precisely. And finally, you have method and discipline. This is the organizational side of things.
Yes, that's where all the logistics come in.
Yep. Method and discipline covers everything from the structure of the army to the management of resources and the chain of command. Think smooth operation of logistics, basically. Without that, even the best strategy is going to fall apart.
It's like the unsung heroes behind the scenes, making sure everything runs smoothly so the army can actually function out in the field.
Exactly. The art of war really stresses this need to pay attention to every detail.
Well, speaking of detail, one of the things Sun Tzu is famous for is his focus on deception. He even says, all warfare is based on deception. That's a pretty bold statement.
It is. But what he's really getting at is the psychological dimension of warfare. It's about misleading the enemy, making them miscalculate, and ultimately using their mistakes against them.
It's like playing poker. You bluff, conceal your true intentions, try to gain an advantage.
Right. And this isn't limited to warfare either. Think about business negotiations or even just everyday life. Understanding how to use strategic concealment can make a huge difference in the outcome.
It's like Sun Tzu is saying we should all be strategic thinkers, not just in war, but in life, learning to understand human nature and use psychology to our advantage.
Exactly. But let's not forget, Sun Tzu also understood the cost of war. He wasn't just about winning battles. He recognized the burden of maintaining an army.
He actually went so far as to calculate the cost of supporting 100,000 men. Back then, the logistics were insane. Imagine the expense of food, weapons, transportation.
And the human cost, the loss of life, the impact on families and communities. Sun Tzu knew all too well that prolonged warfare hurts everyone involved.
So he advocated for quick and decisive victories, to minimize casualties and end the conflict as soon as possible.
Right. He believed in choosing your battles carefully, striking decisively, and finding a resolution that preserves your resources and limits long-term damage.
Okay, so that's the big picture, but how about the tactics? What were some of the specific approaches Sun Tzu suggested for achieving those swift victories?
One key concept he introduced is variation in tactics, using the terms Cheng and Qi to describe direct and indirect approaches.
Cheng and Qi. Those almost sound like martial arts terms.
They do have a certain flow to them. Think of Cheng as a direct confrontation, a head-on attack, while Qi represents a more indirect approach. Think flanking maneuvers, surprise attacks, that sort of thing.
So it's like the difference between a boxer throwing a jab and a judo master using an opponent's momentum against them. One is direct, the other is more strategic.
Exactly. Sun Tzu advocated for using both Cheng and Qi together, keeping the enemy guessing, creating a fluid and unpredictable fighting style.
So it's about being adaptable, hitting them when they're vulnerable, always keeping them off balance.
That's the idea. And that's just one piece of the puzzle when it comes to the strategic insights in the art of war.
It's incredible how much depth there is to this book. From the 9 situations of warfare to his whole chapter on spies. It's like he covered every angle of conflict.
He did a pretty thorough job, and what's remarkable is how many of these ancient principles are still relevant today, even outside the context of war.
But we'll save those deeper dives for later. For now, let's move on to some of the criticisms surrounding Sun Tzu's work, and look at how his teachings can be applied to the modern world. Maybe not always in the ways you'd expect.
One of the big criticisms is that the art of war can be misinterpreted. People take it out of context, especially the stuff about deception.
Yeah, that makes sense. I mean, if you just focus on those bits, you might end up thinking it's okay to be unethical as long as you win. Like the ends justify the means.
Exactly. It's like you're giving someone a powerful tool, but no instructions on how to use it safely.
So you really have to be careful about applying these strategies to modern situations, rightness, and think about the ethical implications.
For sure. Another criticism is that Sun Tzu kind of presents war in this idealized way, like it's a game of chess or something.
But war is messy.
Yeah.
It's chaotic. There are all these emotional complexities that go way beyond just tactics and strategy.
Exactly. You've got the fog of war, unpredictable human behavior, the devastating impact on civilians, things Sun Tzu doesn't really address.
So the art of war is great for strategic thinking. But you can't take it literally. You got to understand its limitations. And remember, war is never a pretty thing.
Absolutely. But even with those criticisms, Sun Tzu's work is incredibly influential.
It's amazing that these ideas still resonate with people today, even centuries later.
And it's not just about warfare either. Sun Tzu's perspective on strategy, leadership, and psychology is relevant to all sorts of fields.
He makes you think differently about power, about conflict, about making choices in difficult situations.
He reminds us that the best strategies are often subtle. They require adaptability and a deep understanding of human nature.
And speaking of understanding human nature, Sun Tzu really emphasizes knowing both yourself and your enemy.
He has that famous quote, "If you know the enemy and know yourself, you need not fear the result of 100 battles." It's about self-awareness and really understanding your opponent.
It's like saying knowledge is power. The more you know, the better your decisions will be.
He talks a lot about gathering intelligence, using spies effectively. Always be seeking information that can give you an advantage.
Be proactive.
Yeah.
Anticipate threats. Seize opportunities before anyone else even realizes they exist.
And knowing yourself means knowing your limitations too. Knowing when to push forward and when to hold back.
Be honest with yourself. Don't let pride or ego get in the way of making smart decisions.
Exactly. Sometimes the best move is to wait for a better opportunity.
This applies to so much more than war. Business negotiations, personal relationships, anything where there's conflict or competition.
Sun Tzu understood that to really succeed, you have to understand human nature at a deep level.
Okay, so let's get into his leadership advice. What did Sun Tzu think were the most important qualities for a commander?
He believed in a combination of intelligence, discipline, and the ability to inspire your troops. He used the term Tao to describe the leader's moral authority.
Tao. Isn't that like a core concept in Eastern philosophy? Something about aligning with the natural order and acting with integrity.
You got it. Sun Tzu thought a leader who embodied Tao could inspire loyalty, obedience, and a shared sense of purpose.
It's not just about barking orders. It's about earning respect and leading by example.
Absolutely. And communicating clearly is crucial, making sure everyone understands the orders and there's no ambiguity in the chain of command.
Yeah, because misunderstandings can be deadly, especially in war.
Right. He also cautioned against micromanaging. He said leaders should trust their subordinates and delegate effectively.
So it's about empowering your team, letting them make decisions in their area of expertise.
He knew that trying to control every little thing leads to overwhelm, and it just doesn't work.
So effective leadership is about building trust, sharing responsibility, and keeping those lines of communication open. At least that's what Sun Tzu seems to be saying.
Right. And then there's discipline. That's essential for both the leader and the troops. A well-disciplined army is a force to be reckoned with.
But discipline doesn't have to mean being harsh or tyrannical, right?
No, not at all. It's more about structure, accountability, having shared expectations.
Like a well-rehearsed orchestra. Every musician plays their part perfectly, guided by the conductor's vision.
Exactly. Since you believe that with discipline and a wise leader, an army could achieve victory and minimize unnecessary bloodshed.
And this idea of leadership goes way beyond just the military, right? It's relevant to all kinds of modern organizations.
Definitely. Sun Tzu's insights into leadership are timeless. They provide a framework for building strong teams, fostering trust, and dealing with complex situations.
He reminds us that effective leadership is about finding that balance between intelligence, integrity, and a deep understanding of human nature.
Speaking of human nature, one of the most interesting parts of the art of war is its focus on psychological warfare.
Psychological warfare. Sounds kind of sinister, like mind games and manipulation.
In a way, it is. Sun Tzu believed that the mind was the ultimate battlefield.
So it's about attacking the enemy's morale, breaking their will to fight, making them doubt themselves.
Exactly. He understood that things like fear and uncertainty can be just as powerful as any weapon.
So you exploit their weaknesses,
Right.
play on their anxieties, try to gain a psychological advantage.
Right. He talks about using deception, propaganda, specific tactics designed to demoralize the enemy.
Like spreading rumors, making them think you have a bigger army than you actually do, creating confusion.
Exactly. Think about the Trojan horse. That's a classic example of psychological warfare.
Brilliant deception that led to the downfall of an entire city. And this stuff is still relevant today, right? Especially with all the social media and information warfare we see now.
Absolutely. It's about controlling the narrative, shaving public opinion, using those tactics to achieve your goals.
It's incredible how much Sun Tzu's work applies to the modern world.
It really shows that battles aren't just fought on physical battlefields. Sometimes the most important battles are fought in the minds of your opponents.
Okay, so let's look at some of Sun Tzu's specific advice. He seems to put a lot of emphasis on terrain.
He does. Understanding and utilizing the physical environment was crucial in his view. A good general uses the terrain to their advantage.
So you use the environment as a weapon. You exploit hills, rivers, forests, whatever you can to get an edge.
Exactly. He talks about taking the high ground, controlling choke points, using things like fire or water to disrupt the enemy's movements.
So a good strategist sees the environment as an extension of their army. They use it to amplify their strengths and exploit the enemy's weaknesses.
Right. He even classified different types of terrain. Each one has its own strategic implications.
Like what? Can you give an example?
Okay, so he talks about accessible ground. That's open terrain that's easy to move across. And then you have entangling ground, which is full of obstacles and hard to navigate.
So on accessible ground, you prioritize speed and maneuverability to outflank your enemy. But in entangling ground, you might set up an ambush.
You're getting it. He also talks about temporizing ground, which is good for delaying the enemy, and narrow passes, which are natural choke points that are easy to defend.
It's fascinating how much thought he put into analyzing the environment.
A general who masters the terrain can dictate the terms of engagement, forcing the enemy to fight on their terms.
So it's all about adapting your strategy to the landscape, using it to outmaneuver your opponent.
Exactly. And this idea applies to more than just warfare. Think about business negotiations or even personal relationships.
So understanding the terrain, whether it's the context of a deal or the emotional landscape of a conversation, can give you an advantage.
That's the idea. It's about awareness. Being mindful of your surroundings, both physical and metaphorical, so you can navigate complex situations effectively.
Sun Tzu is telling us to pay attention to the environment because it plays a big role in our choices and actions.
Right. It's about adaptability, recognizing the context, using your knowledge of the terrain to achieve your goals. Now, let's talk about another important point. Sun Tzu really stressed avoiding drawn-out conflicts.
He was all about those quick, decisive victories, right? He thought dragging things out was bad for everyone.
Absolutely. Prolonged warfare drains resources, destroys morale, and it weakens a nation.
He even compared it to a fire that slowly burns everything in its path.
A quick strike puts the fire out before it can cause too much damage.
So choose your battles wisely and aim for a resolution that minimizes losses.
Exactly. And this is where logistics are so important, making sure your army has the supplies and support it needs.
Without that, even the best plan will fail.
He had a good analogy for that. He compared an army without supplies to a tree without roots. It can't survive.
So the practical side of war is just as important as the strategy.
Now let's get into one of the most fascinating aspects of Sun Tzu's work: deception and surprise.
He was all about keeping the enemy guessing, making them think he was doing one thing when he was really doing another, setting traps.
That's right. Remember his famous line, "All warfare is based on deception." It's about creating a psychological advantage, making your opponent believe something that's not true.
It's like playing poker at a high level. You bluff, you hide your true intentions, you try to manipulate the other players.
Exactly. He talks about using feints, diversions, making it seem like you're stronger or weaker than you actually are, anything to mislead the enemy.
So it's not just about secrecy, it's about actively misleading your opponent, controlling what they see, and then using that to your advantage.
Exactly. You might spread rumors, create the illusion of a larger army, even stage distractions. Keep the enemy off balance.
Like a magician using sleight of hand and misdirection, they make you look at one thing while they do something else.
That's the kind of strategic thinking Sun Tzu is advocating for. And this isn't limited to the battlefield.
Are you saying these ideas apply to everyday life?
Absolutely. Think about business negotiations, political campaigns, even just interacting with people.
So you might strategically hide your intentions, create diversions, do something unexpected. These are all tactics that can be useful.
It's about being aware of the psychology of the situation, understanding how people perceive things, and then using that knowledge to your advantage.
Sun Tzu is reminding us that sometimes the most effective strategies are the subtle ones, the ones that catch people off guard.
It's about being a step ahead, anticipating your opponent's next move. Deception isn't about tricking people, it's about outmaneuvering them.
Now let's talk about another important idea, Sun Tzu's emphasis on knowing your enemy.
He considered this just as important as knowing yourself.
Remember that quote, "If you know the enemy and know yourself, you need not fear the result of 100 battles." It's all about the power of knowledge.
He believed if you really studied your enemy, their strengths, their weaknesses, their motivations, even their psychology, then you could develop a strategy that maximized your chances of success.
So you become a keen observer, use everything at your disposal, spies, intelligence gathering, whatever it takes to gain that edge.
He compared it to a doctor diagnosing a patient. You have to carefully observe, understand the root of the problem, and then prescribe the right treatment.
It's a very methodical approach to conflict. The more you know about your opponent, the better you can defeat them.
And this applies to so much more than warfare.
Also,
Think about business negotiations, political campaigns, even personal relationships. The more you understand the other person, the better you can communicate and build relationships.
so it's about empathy, putting yourself in their shoes, trying to see things from their perspective.
Exactly. Sun Tzu's insights remind us that understanding is key to effective communication, no matter the situation.
It's about being a student of human nature, recognizing that knowledge is power, and then using that knowledge to navigate the complexities of human interaction.
Now let's shift gears and talk about Sun Tzu's views on alliances and diplomacy.
He understood that war wasn't always the best solution. Sometimes it's better to form partnerships and negotiate.
Right. Sun Tzu believed a good leader could assess the political landscape, identify potential allies, and forge partnerships that strengthen their position.
There's strength in numbers. Having powerful allies can deter aggression and boost your influence.
He had the simple analogy: a bundle of sticks is much stronger than each stick on its own.
It's a good reminder that cooperation can be more effective than confrontation. But choosing the right allies is important risk.
Absolutely. Sun Tzu warned against allying with untrustworthy people or those with different goals.
So you need partners who share your vision, who complement your strengths, who are truly committed to the cause.
Exactly. And he also stressed the importance of diplomacy, using negotiation and persuasion to achieve your objectives without resorting to violence.
It's not just about winning on the battlefield. It's about winning in the realm of ideas, building relationships, finding peaceful solutions.
He believed a skilled diplomat could be just as valuable as a skilled general.
So it's about mastering persuasion, understanding communication, finding common ground, even with people who disagree with you.
He made an interesting comparison. He said it was like a musician harmonizing different notes to create a beautiful melody.
It's a powerful way of looking at leadership. True strength comes not just from military might, but also from building relationships, forging alliances, and using diplomacy effectively.
And these principles apply to all sorts of situations, not just international relations.
Like what? Can you give us some examples?
Think about business negotiations, community organizing, even family dynamics, building alliances, finding common ground, using diplomacy to resolve conflicts. These are essential skills for navigating any kind of human interaction.
It seems like Sun Tzu is saying that communication and cooperation are essential for a harmonious world.
Exactly. Now let's shift gears and talk about morale, the psychological state of the army.
Sun Tzu understood that the spirit of the troops, their confidence, their belief in the cause, all played a crucial role in victory or defeat.
Absolutely. High morale was essential in his view. He knew that fear and doubt could be incredibly damaging.
So it's not just about having the best weapons or the best soldiers. It's about having a strong sense of purpose and the will to fight.
He talks about inspiring the troops, building their confidence, creating a sense of unity.
It's about fostering trust and respect, making sure everyone is committed to the mission.
He suggested using rewards, recognition, appeals to patriotism and honor, anything to boost morale.
So you appeal to their emotions, their sense of duty, and their rational understanding of the mission.
Right. And clear communication is vital. Everyone needs to understand the orders, the plan, the reasoning behind everything.
Because uncertainty can lead to fear and doubt, which can sabotage the entire operation.
He compared a confused army to a flock of sheep without a shepherd. They're easily scattered and vulnerable.
So you have to provide clear direction, instill confidence, create order amidst the chaos.
He also warned against things that damage morale. Harsh punishments, inconsistent leadership, not caring about the well-being of your troops.
Treating your people with respect, recognizing their sacrifices, taking care of their basic needs, those are crucial for maintaining a strong and resilient force.
Exactly. Sun Tzu knew that neglecting morale was a recipe for disaster.
His insights into morale are a good reminder that leadership is more than just giving orders. It's about inspiring, motivating, creating a sense of purpose that empowers people to achieve great things.
It's about recognizing the human element, understanding how emotions work, and creating an environment of trust and confidence.
It's about creating a winning culture, not just a winning strategy.
Now let's talk about Sun Tzu's emphasis on adaptability and flexibility in warfare.
He didn't believe in being rigid, right? He thought a good general had to be able to change plans based on what was happening on the battlefield.
Mostly. One of his most famous quotes is, "Just as water retains no constant shape, so in warfare there are no constant conditions."
So the only constant is change, especially in a conflict situation.
He compared a skilled general to a chameleon, adapting to the environment, blending in, changing to survive.
So be flexible. Recognize that things are going to change and adjust your strategy as needed.
He stressed the importance of observation, gathering information, and constantly reassessing the situation to identify opportunities and threats.
Be proactive, anticipate changes, and make adjustments before the enemy can exploit your weaknesses.
He likened it to sailing a ship. You have to constantly adjust the sails to the wind and currents to stay on course.
That's a great analogy. It shows the need for fluidity, adaptability, and a deep understanding of everything that's happening around you.
And these principles apply beyond warfare.
In what ways?
Think about business, politics, or even personal relationships. Being able to adapt to change, being flexible in your approach, adjusting your plans based on new information. These are crucial for success.
So be open to new possibilities, embrace change, and don't get stuck in your ways.
Sun Tzu reminds us that having a great plan isn't enough. You have to be willing to deviate from that plan when necessary.
To improvise, to innovate, to find creative solutions when things don't go as expected.
It's about being a lifelong learner, always seeking knowledge, expanding your perspectives, and refining your strategies.
Okay, let's talk about discipline and order. Sun Tzu seemed to think that a well-disciplined army could achieve almost anything.
Absolutely. He saw discipline as essential for any successful army. He believed that without order, structure, and a clear chain of command, even the most talented soldiers would be ineffective.
It's like saying an army without discipline is like a body without a skeleton. It can't really function.
That's a great way to put it. He compared a disciplined army to a well-oiled machine where all the parts work together smoothly.
So you need to create a culture of accountability where everyone understands their role and their responsibilities.
He recommended using clear rules, consistent enforcement, and rewards for good behavior to create that discipline.
So it's not just about punishment. It's about encouraging positive behavior and discouraging actions that harm the group.
Exactly. And he stressed the importance of training and practice, making sure everyone was prepared for the chaos of battle.
It's like building muscle memory so that in moments of pressure, you can react instinctively.
He compared it to a musician practicing scales. You're building those fundamental skills that allow for effortless performance.
That's a great analogy. It highlights the importance of preparation and dedication in any field.
And these principles are relevant to all sorts of organizations, not just armies.
How so?
Think about businesses, schools, even families. Clear rules, consistent enforcement, and a culture of accountability create a more productive and harmonious environment.
So structure, order, shared expectations, these are all important for achieving goals and creating a sense of purpose.
It's about creating a culture where everyone strives to do their best, contributes to a greater good, and feels like they're part of something bigger than themselves.
It's about teamwork, not just individual effort.
Now let's explore Sun Tzu's views on timing and opportunity in warfare. He believed a skilled general had to be able to recognize the perfect moment to strike.
He famously said, "There is a time for attack and a time for defense. He who masters both wins." It's about mastering both patience and decisiveness.
He compared it to a hunter stalking their prey, observing, waiting for the right moment, and then striking with precision.
It's about timing, patience, and knowing when to act.
He talked about gathering intelligence, analyzing the enemy's weaknesses, and identifying the ideal moment to attack when they're most vulnerable.
Be strategic, not impulsive, and wait for the best opportunity.
He used the analogy of a farmer planting seeds. You wait for the right season, the right conditions, and then you nurture the crops to ensure a good harvest.
Success comes from planning, preparation, and waiting for the right moment.
And this applies to more than just war.
Like what? Give us some real-world examples.
Think about business, investing, even personal relationships. Knowing when to act, when to take a risk, can make all the difference.
So it's about understanding life cycles. There are times for everything, knowing when to plant, when to nurture, when to harvest.
Exactly. Sun Tzu reminds us that patience is important, that impulsiveness can be costly, and that success often goes to those who are prepared and know how to seize the right moment.
Okay, let's talk about calculated risks. It seems like Sun Tzu believed that while recklessness is bad, a good general has to be willing to take risks.
Right. He said, "He who is prudent and lies in wait for an enemy who is not will be victorious." It's about finding a balance between caution and boldness.
So don't be afraid to act, but don't be foolish either.
He believed a skilled general carefully weighs the potential rewards against the potential costs. They make decisions that maximize gains while minimizing losses.
It's about strategy, not recklessness. Understanding that every action has consequences and being willing to take a risk when the potential benefits outweigh the downsides.
He compared it to gambling. You have to know the odds, manage your money, and know when to bet big and when to fold.
So it's about assessing the risk, making calculated decisions, and understanding that sometimes you have to gamble to win big.
He stressed the importance of gathering information, analyzing the enemy's strengths and weaknesses, and identifying opportunities where a calculated risk can yield significant rewards.
It's about strategy, not impulsiveness. Understanding the potential consequences and being willing to step outside your comfort zone when the situation demands it.
And this applies to more than just warfare.
How so?
Think about business, investing, or even personal relationships. The ability to assess risk, make informed decisions, and take calculated gambles can be the key to achieving your goals.
So Sun Tzu reminds us that sometimes you have to be bold, but boldness without wisdom is foolish.
It's about being strategic, understanding the potential consequences, and being willing to step outside your comfort zone when the reward is worth the risk.
Now, let's come back to something we talked about earlier. Sun Tzu's emphasis on deception and the element of surprise.
He believed it was a fundamental principle of warfare. A good general has to be able to mislead the enemy, make them misunderstand his intentions, and use unpredictability to his advantage.
He said, all warfare is based on deception. It's about psychology, making the enemy believe something that's not true.
He talked about feints, diversions, even creating false impressions of strength or weakness, anything to mislead the enemy.
So it's not just about keeping secrets, it's about actively trying to trick your opponent, making them see what you want them to see, and then taking advantage of their misunderstanding.
Exactly. You might use spies to spread rumors, make your army look bigger than it is, create distractions, anything to keep the enemy off balance.
That's like playing mind games, keeping them guessing.
And these principles, while they come from warfare, can also be applied to other areas of life.
Such as?
Think about business negotiations, political campaigns, or even just interacting with people on a daily basis.
So strategically hiding your intentions, creating diversions, doing the unexpected, those can all be valuable tactics.
It's about understanding how people think, how they form their perceptions, and then using that to shape things in your favor.
Sun Tzu reminds us that sometimes the best strategies are the subtle ones, the ones that catch people by surprise.
It's about being a step ahead, anticipating your opponent's moves. Deception isn't about tricking people, it's about outsmarting them.
Now let's talk about momentum. Sun Tzu really emphasized seizing the initiative and maintaining that forward momentum.
He believed a good general had to control the pace of the battle, keep the enemy off balance, and never let up.
He said that momentum is like a rolling stone, gathering speed and power as it goes downhill.
Exactly. It's about taking the initiative, forcing the enemy to react to you, not the other way around. He believed that constantly pressing the attack, even if it's just feints and diversions, could demoralize the enemy and create opportunities for a decisive victory.
So be aggressive, but also be strategic. Know when to push and when to hold back.
He used the analogy of a river constantly flowing, finding the path of least resistance, wearing down even the strongest obstacles over time.
It's a great image. It shows that even subtle, consistent movement can create an advantage and wear down resistance.
And this principle applies beyond warfare.
How so?
Think about business, sports, or even personal goals. Maintaining momentum, constantly striving for progress, even if it's just small steps. If you're not moving forward, you're stuck. Whether it's a personal goal, your career, or even a relationship, momentum is key.
So you have to take action, make progress, even if it's just small steps.
Exactly. And don't forget to celebrate those small wins. It helps build confidence and keeps the momentum going.
It's about enjoying the process, not just focusing on the end result.
And remembering that the pursuit of excellence is a lifelong journey.
It's amazing how much wisdom there is in the art of war.
Yeah.
It's so much more than just a military manual.
Sun Tzu's insights into strategy, leadership, human nature, they're timeless.
And they're relevant to anyone who wants to understand conflict and achieve success, no matter what field they're in.
It encourages us to be adaptable, cunning, and compassionate, and above all, to understand people.
So whether you're a CEO, a coach, or just trying to figure out life, the art of war can teach you a lot.
It all comes down to understanding yourself, your opponent, and the world around you.
We can't recommend this book enough. Pick up a copy and see how its lessons can help you.
And remember Sun Tzu's words, every battle is won before it's fought.
Thanks for joining us for this deep dive into the art of war. We'll see you next time.